Hey there, leader. I know how overwhelming leadership can be. I mean, trust me, I've been there. But my goal is pretty simple. I want to help you thrive. I want to help you find that sweet harmony between your professional drive and your personal life. And on my podcast, I love diving into the headaches of leadership and sharing real actionable solutions that'll help you not just survive, but thrive. And we talk about how to rise professionally without sacrificing your family life. And I even get pretty real about stories of struggle and triumph on finding harmony between both worlds. And I am beyond grateful that you are tuning into the podcast and following and engaging on social media and working on your personal growth. But did you know I'd love to walk alongside you personally on your leadership journey? I don't just preach personal development, I live it out. And that's why I'm super excited to share that I'm now a member of the Maxwell Leadership Certified Team. This means I can bring you the teachings of John C. Maxwell. Yes, the John C. Maxwell, the country's #1 leadership authority. Now, this certification just isn't about me leveling up. It's about showing you that I'm committed to delivering the very best guidance for you and your team. And if you're ready to transform your leadership, hop on over to leadershipontherocks.com and click that schedule a call button. Whether it's personal development, company wide training, or going through change management, let's connect and start your journey of success together. Again, that's leadershipontherocks.com. Let's thrive together.
So you're
Yes.
constantly flexing in ways that is disrupting the way that you lead effectively. So what cultural intelligence does is that it helps you not only understand these differences, but it actually activates action. Because now as you act on what you're learning, you can learn to plan for the next exchange and the next exchange and the next exchange. So it makes you a much more holistic leader.
This is the Leadership on the Rocks podcast, where we equip and empower leaders like you to thrive in and create harmony between your professional and personal lives. I'm your host, Bethany Reese, and in today's episode, we're going to be talking with author and leadership coach Loren Rosario-Maldonado about using cultural intelligence for professional development, personal growth, and leadership of others and ourselves. Loren has dedicated over 25 years to leadership coaching, change management, and cultural intelligence. Her unique ability to create human-centered workplace experiences and build high-performing teams has transformed organizations and solidified her reputation as an industry trailblazer. Her latest book, Becoming the Change: The Power of Cultural Intelligence, is a testament to her commitment to fostering cultural diversity and personal growth. Welcome to the Leadership on the Rocks podcast, Loren. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you so much, Bethany. Thank you for having me on your podcast.
And I love your platform. I love what you're teaching. It is so important. My listeners know I was an educator and an administrator in Houston, Texas, which is very diverse. We have people from all over the world coming for the oil and gas business. And I appreciate so much that you are speaking up and out about how important cultural intelligence is. But I really have a feeling that a lot of people don't understand or know what cultural intelligence is. They may have heard of emotional intelligence. They may have heard of diversity, belonging, and inclusion. So can we start at step 0 and you define for us what you mean by cultural intelligence?
That's a great question. Cultural intelligence is a tool. It's a tool that helps us develop the skills that we need to understand differences, people who are different from us. And there is this misconception that culture is about ethnicity and race and national origin, but it's so much more than that. I like to joke that, I'm Apple culture and my husband is Microsoft culture. So we are definitely a bicultural couple here in this household, right?
Oh,
But
Apple, the
culture,
iPhone, and the
yes.
Samsung, right? Yeah.
Yes. So he's a Microsofter all the way through. He loves his Android phone, loves his, his Microsoft and operating system. I'm Apple all through. I mean, I get allergic when I have to use his phone for whatever reason. But, cultural intelligence has helped me to adapt and not have a tachycardia when I have to use his phone. And
So
so
makes sense.
it's that. It's, what is culture really? It is the way a certain group with shared beliefs and values does things. And so I like to do things the Apple way. He likes to do things, the square Microsoft way. But in a gist, that's what cultural intelligence is. And I'm not gonna geek everyone out and to the research, but it's been researched for over 20 years. And this one
Mhm.
tool is powerful because of that, because it helps you not only understand, but actually uh, work better and relate better with people who are different from you.
Man, I love that you said it's a tool. A lot of times we think because it has the word intelligence in it, that we think it's fixed. You have it or you don't have it. But a tool is something that you're constantly using to cultivate, to get better, to make progress in something. And I just love the fact that you're calling it a tool. I don't think I've ever heard it called that way before. And that in and of itself is helping me have a different lens on this whole conversation that we're fixing to have. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. It's not a magic wand. We have to do the
Hmm.
work. And you're right, it's learned. It's not fixed, and you're
Hmm.
continuously learning, right? So
Yes.
it's important to understand that it's a tool. It's not something that you use as a crutch to stereotype either, but it's not something that, you're going to learn today and use tomorrow and be done. It is
Hmm.
an evolution.
Yes, absolutely. So now that we can kind of have an idea of what it is, and I love your example because I think everybody out there feels it, the Microsoft, the Apple, the iPhone versus the Android. We understand that. And so we know what it is now. But let's talk about why it's so important to learn it. And then we'll get into the how later of how we grow and utilize that tool and make progress. But why is cultural intelligence so important in a couple of different areas? One, just in general in our lives, but two, specifically in our leadership. So feel free to tackle whichever one you want first.
Absolutely. In our lives, we are dealing with differences all day, every day. I like to use my husband as an example because not because he is my husband, but because we are both Dominican. We are both Latin Americans, right? But he was born in Dominican Republic and I was not. So I am that second generation immigrant who is, let's say, Dominican by default, right? So a
Hmm.
lot of the customs, the norms, the beliefs that come from the Dominican Republic were unbeknownst to me because I didn't live them. He did. And so
Yeah.
even though we both speak Spanish fluently, we read it, we understand it, it goes much deeper than language. And it wasn't until cultural intelligence came around in my life that I was able to use those skills and go deeper to understand my cultural values and how they impact the way I approach work, the way I approach relationships, the way I approach everything in my life. And so understanding those cultural values then helps you understand how you approach these areas of your life so that you can understand others and how they approach these areas of your life. And what's not more important than that for effective leadership?
Hmm.
As a leader, you're leading all types of different people in all types of different situations. But what remains constant is how you value certain areas and how culture influences those values. So, as a leader, you're constantly flexing, and the level of flexing today is much more complex than it was 5, 10, 15 years ago.
Hmm.
Now
Everybody
you're
said
having
amen to that.
now you're having to do so in
Yeah.
a nanosecond. And
Hmm.
now you have AI to contend with. Oh, and by the way, now you're virtual.
Yes.
And now you have a hybrid workforce. And now you're communicating with different people in different ways, in through different modalities, in person,
Hmm.
digitally, hybrid, mix and match, right? So you're
Yes.
constantly flexing in ways that is disrupting the way that you lead effectively. So, what cultural intelligence does is that it helps you not only understand these differences, but it actually activates action. Because now, as you act on what you're learning, you can learn to plan for the next exchange and the next exchange and the
Mhm.
next exchange. So it makes you a much more holistic leader.
I love that. Thinking about the first thing that you were talking about, going back to life, is analyzing your own paradigm, your own, why do I act the way that I do? Why do I believe what I do? Why do I, cook the foods that I do? Something very simple. Why do I have the accent that I do or talk like I do? And we usually come from that paradigm that everybody is like me. Everybody's had the experiences that I've had. They have the same beliefs and values. And then, so step one, from what I'm hearing, is cultural intelligence. The first tool is to kind of excavate and reflect on your own background, your own culture, to understand why. And then it turns outward, where the tool is now working to understand others. So then you can better relate to one another. You have more understanding and empathy, and you can communicate better because, as you said, the cards are stacked against us. There's so many things to get in the way of just communication alone in leadership, because there's so many different avenues and people can read things the wrong way. And I love that you explained it that way of, it starts with yourself, understanding where you're coming from before you can even look to seek to understand where others are coming from. So that's such a beautiful thing. Does I know some people out there have heard about cultural competency. Does that play into cultural intelligence at all? That concept?
They're a little bit different in the sense that cultural intelligence itself, the framework, the model, is based on the loci of intelligence.
Okay.
And so that is the biggest differentiator between the two. It's used interchangeably, right? Cultural
Hmm.
intelligence has 13 subdimensions that highlight the capabilities that you need to develop cultural intelligence. And so that is the biggest differentiator of the two.
Awesome. Well, I want to dive into your book. You wrote a book and I love it. It's called Becoming the Change: The Power of Cultural Intelligence. Number one, I love the title of that, Becoming the Change. What inspired you to give the book this title?
I was empowered to give it the title because I discovered the power of cultural intelligence myself. And as I'm a researcher at heart and by trade, I'm working on my PhD. As I was researching this topic, I found others whose power was so evident in their lived experience, even when they didn't know what cultural intelligence was.
Mhm.
And so I was absolutely blown away by how powerful this tool can be for anyone in any role, in any industry, any background, whether at home or at work. And as I became or started my journey towards cultural intelligence, I learned this more and more. My daughter was telling me yesterday how she had a situation and cultural intelligence helped her, resolve it, what she's learned about cultural intelligence. And so it is that much more powerful. We know
Mhm.
that the quality of your life is determined by the quality of your relationships, whether at home or at work. So cultivating this tool and integrating it into your life is a powerful tool. I have seen
Mhm.
it, I've lived it, and I cannot express enough how powerful it can be.
Yeah. And the example you gave, you said you've seen it, you've lived it, it's changed you. And now you see it in your daughter because of what you're modeling. And so this can have generational impact, from here on out. Think about that. Of if
Absolutely.
when you become the change because you now have or are developing using that tool of cultural intelligence, it's not just for you. It is going to have that spill cascading effect where it's going to be affecting all those around you. And I love that. I'm so proud of your daughter. Way to we always wonder, are our kids learning? Are they picking up anything that we're, dishing out? And the answer is yes. It's what we model.
Yes, it was at first when I was writing the book, I was nervous because I was nervous about what they were going to say, what they were going to think. It's a very raw experience. I had to go very deep into my own beliefs and my experience. This emerged from a deep, deep identity crisis that I experienced
Mhm.
because I didn't know anything about my culture. I didn't know anything about my heritage and understanding not only my history, but how it influenced my beliefs and what I value uh, was an incredibly powerful experience that helped me really amplify every single relationship that I have. And so you said it earlier, as a leader, we're constantly being relied upon for answers. We're
Mhm.
constantly being relied upon for direction. But if we don't have a strong foundation and understanding about what got us here, what's our history, how it influenced the way we think, what we prefer, our values, the level of direction and support we can give others is very superficial.
Mhm.
But once you understand that and you connect it to your practice, whether as a leader or individual contributor role or in your home, all of a sudden the depth and the quality of your exchanges, your relationships, your dialogue is much more profound, which makes you that much more impactful.
Oh, I could not agree more. And I just wonder, you have so many, as a leader, you have so many interactions all day long. You're in meetings, you're having conversations, you're getting texts, your emails are blowing up. So you have all of these avenues to have these conversations. And if you're not careful, if you are just always being the same and not paying attention to the audience, the person that you're engaging with, there's a lot of offense that can happen. A lot of people can take what you say and what you do the wrong way. And I think for me, understanding the cultural intelligence tool helps me slow my roll, helps me take that into consideration of it is not about me trying to spew out information. Like get what I want to say, get what I want to say. It's about where are you coming from so that I can deliver the information in a way in which it can be received and understood and acted upon or whatever the case may be. So can you walk us through almost like a how-to guide? You know, you're calling cultural intelligence a tool. How do we use the tool? How do we grow in cultural intelligence? Because we know it's just going to make us a better leader. But how do we use the tool?
That's a great question, and a major reason why I included the choice playbook in the book, right? Because you always we always start thinking, wow, this is so profound. I want to do it. Yes.
Mhm.
Where do I sign up? But you first have to understand whether you're ready.
Oh, oh, self check.
We talk a lot about looking in the mirror. That's hard.
Hmm.
That's very hard because all of a sudden you have to acknowledge every zit, every pimple, every freckle, every single cell that you see. And what you don't see is impacting what you see even more. Are you
Oh,
ready for that? So the first part is understanding whether you are ready for that. Why are you so curious about this and why is it important now? It goes much deeper than asking why, because asking why is very emotional. But understanding whether you're ready, asking, am I really ready? Am I on a scale of 1 to 10? Am I ready to do the work? All of a sudden, you're holding yourself accountable. So understanding whether you're ready, in business, we call that change readiness, right? Are you
hmm.
ready? Then understanding why you are ready now, why that is a 10 as opposed to a 1. It's okay if it's not the right time. It's okay because you're being honest with yourself. And that's where the work begins. Then
Mm,
understanding who are you really impacting with this change? Is it yourself? Is it your family? Is it your team? Is it your organization? Why do they need this change from you? And why is that important? Right? Because once you get into the work, it's work. Looking in the mirror, identifying what's there, identifying what your values are, what makes you tick, where did
Mhm.
that come from? Is it inherited or is it inherent? That is a big, big distinction because a lot of our beliefs, a lot of our values have been handed off to us.
Mhm.
So understanding whether they are ours to begin with or not is part of the work because guess what? Now you have to unravel all of that.
It feels like therapy. I couldn't help but think the whole time you're talking. It's almost like leadership therapy, well, life therapy of who am I and where did all of my habits come from? And how can I unpack that? And so, can you repeat that again? And I'm so sorry that I interrupted you. You said, it's asking the, am I ready? It's asking, why do I want to do this? And then it led to action. But what were the things in the middle? Can you say that
In the
again?
middle is who needs me to do this? In business, we call it stakeholders. This is a very real way of thinking who is impacted by this change. Leadership is very broad. Leadership can be a practice or it could be an essence.
Mm,
You don't need a title to be a leader, right? We know that. We've seen many, many individual contributors who actually sometimes lead better than the ones with the title. We've
that's
seen
true.
that too, right?
Yeah.
It gets rocky to your point. So who is going to be impacted by this? Then you can go to step two, which is, okay, I'm committing to looking in the mirror. What's there? What are my beliefs? Are these mine? Right? You start taking perspective, you start taking inventory, and you start gaining perspective on that inventory. Oh, this is why I value time so much. Because
Mhm.
growing up, we were never allowed to be late. Never. It was a sin to be late. Or vice versa. Oh, this is why I'm always late because everyone in my family is always late. Or this
Mhm.
is why we always talk over each other because we always have something to say. And because we think time is not of the essence, we talk over each other. So you start understanding all these different nuances, taking inventory, understanding, and only then can you start taking action. You start taking action on what you know. Okay, this is how I prefer to approach time. Now I understand that about me. Is it mine to
Mhm.
begin with? This is how I was raised. But am I really bothered by this? If the answer is yes, then you move on to, okay, so I know that this is something that I value. Now I know, right? Humility is part of the playbook. I have to
Mhm.
be humble enough to know that not everyone is like me. You alluded to this earlier. And so, how can I coexist with someone who does not value time? As a leader, how am I leading the way for someone who views time differently? Right? This is one of
Mhm.
my stakeholders. I've already covered this in my change readiness phase. So, why do I need to flex in this moment? Because I've already committed to from the beginning. So as I'm taking this action, all of a sudden, this person feels seen and heard because they're being appreciated for who they are. They're not being changed in the process. You are not changing who you are in the process, but you are coexisting in the
Mhm.
same space. And then as you continue taking action, all of a sudden you're motivated and you're driven to do more and more and more. And this is the essence of cultural intelligence.
I love it. I love it so much. And my listeners know I'm a visual thinker and I just think of that you're tending to the garden, you're cultivating, going back to it's a tool and you're loosening up the soil. If soil is hardened, things don't grow well in it except for weeds. And so you've really got to break it up and look at the individual parts and look at the nutrients and what it needs. And then, once you have that understanding, the soil is so much better to grow whatever it is, plant, fruit, vegetable that you want to do. And that's kind of what I'm picturing. And you mentioned something, you mentioned a nuance. I want to dive into that a little bit deeper, the cultural nuances. Because, like you were talking with time, and that was such a good example because people do view time differently based upon how they were raised. And we usually come to judging another person based upon the nuance of what we believe about time or how our family operated, but then we can easily slap a label on them and say they're a lazy employee just because they have a different view of time. It doesn't mean they produce less quality work. It doesn't mean that they don't do their job well. They just aren't on the same timeline as what maybe I am. Can you dive deeper into what is a cultural nuance and how it plays into all of this?
Absolutely. So there are these 10 cultural value dimensions that impact our behaviors. They're called behavioral preferences. And you can be what's considered monochronic, where you view time in a very linear continuum.
Mhm.
Or you could be polychronic, where you view time in terms of in a nonlinear pattern, right? Time is more fluid. It is much more related to relationships and the quality of the experience as opposed to time itself.
Mhm.
And so when you're managing, let's say, for the most part, I am monochronic. I believe in agendas. I believe in starting on time. I believe in, time is money and ching, ching, ching every second that passes, right? The minute I open my eyes to the minute I fall asleep. But I've had employees who view time very fluidly. And I remember when I started learning about these behavioral preferences, I started realizing that there, I used before that point, I used to see it as, well, they just want to form a deeper relationship with me. They value the personal aspect of their work more than the work itself.
Mhm.
And I erroneously believed that that person did not like to achieve. When I learned about these differences and I learned the monochronic and the polychronic time orientation continuum, all of a sudden I was given a new dictionary to use when having the one-on-ones with this person. All of a sudden, conversations about time management were more related to the relationship of the exchange, the
Mhm.
experience of the exchange. And so I became curious, which is part of the playbook. Can you tell me why is it that every time we start our meeting, you want to talk about my personal life, whether it's what I did last night or how my family is, or all these things unrelated to work before we get to the topic at hand.
Mhm.
And this person said, well, why wouldn't I ask? I value our relationship. You're not just a boss. You're not just my boss. You are a person. And I'm interested in knowing what's going on with you. I said, oh, okay. So all of a sudden, I used that information to then be open to this new experience. Okay, how can we work that into the agenda? I asked. Well, why don't we create space in the beginning and then add the work items and then end with a reconnect. So all of a sudden, we're both valuing time differently. We're not changing who we are or what we value, but we're
Mhm.
making the meeting more effective for the two of us.
Man, that is
So,
such a good example.
so our one-on-ones, I started because this was new to me. So I practiced with her. I would cultivate I would put in 5 minutes in the beginning and 5 minutes at the end as what I call, connection cushions. Okay, I need to be open and like hold my tongue and just answer
Mhm.
anything personal, but also ask her anything personal she wanted to share. So then we jumped into work and then we ended with another reconnect. But what that did was that it sent the message that I truly value her and her approach beyond work. And in turn, she was more motivated, became, in my perspective, a bigger, better achiever,
Mm-hmm.
and it enhanced our relationship for the better. So
Absolutely.
this is why it's powerful, because I could have continued in my own way. I could have continued without summoning the humility to know that I'm not perfect. I don't have all the answers. There are more options and more ways to manage people, but also being open and being courageous enough to ask the question.
Yeah. And that's the first thing I heard is that you suspended judgment. You stop yourself from casting judgment on someone just because they don't operate at the same level, time, whatever it is that you do. And through that suspension of judgment, you then asked a question to seek to know them better, to understand. And you asked the question in a way where it wasn't offensive, as in, like, sometimes whenever I ask my kids, what did you do? And it's already accusatory. It's not accusatory of anything. It's genuine. It's empathetic. I truly want to understand how you operate. Can you explain to me why, this? And I think that's a huge thing that I heard and that I hope our listeners heard through that perfect example of how to engage with others. And I love that you're pointing out humility. It's so important that it's not just about us and our way. We don't do things right. We don't have all the ideas. We don't have all the best ideas. And our employees have so much value to bring. And that's the joy and the beauty of the diversity of having people as a team. Everybody,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. And this is the flexing that's happening on a moment's
Hmm.
notice, and taking these extra minutes will help you as you're navigating all these changes and all these crazy things going on on a daily basis, right? Because
Yes.
you are connecting person to person.
And another thing that it made me think of, as you're giving that example of suspending judgment, asking the question and flexing in the moment as you're calling it, it also keeps you from making and I've heard this terminology and some have, or maybe some haven't, microaggressions, where, and again, it goes to you're offending someone, whether intentional or unintentional, you're still doing something that feels like a slight. It feels like, I'm poking you just to see, what'll happen.
Mhm.
And again, it could be unintentional, but the more that we slow down our own and suspend our own judgments and our remarks and our quips and our comebacks and do more questioning, it helps remove that from the relationship, the working relationship. And hey, and based upon all the examples you've given, the marriage and the parenting as well, like this
That's right.
impacts every aspect of
Every
life. And it's so good.
It's
And
true. It impacts everything, but it has to start with you. If you don't do the work with you first, you cannot get to that point where you can coexist with someone who is different from you at a very deep level. You can do so superficially, but
mhm,
where is the power in that?
yeah.
Where's the true leadership in that?
And I think there's a huge issue of just companies now, talking about diversity, belonging, and inclusion. They'll have a training and say, our leaders, they know how to go, like, go forth and be inclusive and, appreciate diversity. And you are hitting the nail on the head. It is so personal. So, can you help us understand as leaders, what is that first step that we have to take within ourselves, within our hearts, within our minds and our mindsets and our paradigms and our thoughts and our actions and our words? What is that step that we have to take to make this become a tool that we actually use within our leadership?
You first have to go within. You can't, you can't skip this one. You have to ask yourself the tough questions first. If you don't look in the mirror and do that work first and understand, why is it that you want to do this work in the first place? Why are you a leader?
Mm-hmm.
Why do you want to lead others well? Is it because you're being mandated to do so? So what's important about that for you? Right? Because we do have the power to choose. Why am I choosing this? Why now? And who's it for? Then you can start with, where do I come from?
Mm-hmm.
Who is me? We are multidimensional. There's all these different dimensions to us that many of which you can't even see. How do they come together and form who I am? What does my history have to do with it? How has it influenced every part of me? And then how does that part show up at work, at home, in our communities? And where do I go from there? And by the way, holding space for ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
holding space, having empathy for ourselves, for actually doing the work. Because now we've committed, let's give ourselves some grace in the process.
Oh, that's huge. And that is hard.
That's
Giving
hard.
ourselves, yes,
That's hard.
absolutely. So, in thinking of all the work that you've done with cultural intelligence and going out and teaching this to other people and living it and seeing it, being cultivated in your own home with your children, what kind of impact do you hope this book will have on on your readers?
The impact is deeper than even I can explain. But the mission is to motivate, to activate, and to elevate others across the globe, because this is that powerful. So this
Mhm.
book is educating people to actually go deeper in their relationships, starting with the relationship with yourself. You can't have a relationship with someone else if you don't have one with yourself. And you can't do that if you're not motivated to do so. So it's a tool to help you deepen your relationships.
And we need that. I think that we live in such a fast paced world that we don't take time to analyze or reflect on anything hardly. We're just so
No,
busy. We don't know why we
no,
do what we do. We're mad
no,
scrolling social media, yet we don't know why because we don't take a hot second to say, whoa, why do I feel triggered by this? And then unpack those emotions to get to the heart of what is the heart issue I'm having. You
exactly.
know,
We're
we
constantly
just,
going, 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 going. But just like our cell phones need to be plugged in every day, so do we.
mm-hmm.
Some phones, charge faster than others. I'm not going to get into brands, but you're like a cell phone. You need to plug in. And that plugging in means plugging out, even if it's a minute.
And you know what I hope? I hope a lot of people pick up this book, especially a lot of leaders that really have influence for change in the way that society is behaving. So, how do you hope that this book is going to contribute to the current conversation on just the topic of cultural differences, cultural diversity, cultural intelligence? How is your book going to help, support this conversation?
It's going to provide a practical tool to help you have the conversation, and very relatable. Every chapter includes prompts for reflection and perspective taking, because we need that.
Mm-hmm.
But the book is written in such a way that you can use it in any moment, at any time, to refer to something you need in the moment. So you can carry it with you everywhere, maybe to prepare to have a conversation at home or at work. It can help you reference it when you need it, especially when it comes to, relating with others.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I think that this is a must have. I want you leaders out there listening, think about the people that you have conflict with. And it may not be external conflict yet. It may just be internally in your head as you see them walk by and you go, ugh, why? Why do you feel that way about them? Pick up this book and analyze like look at yourself, why you believe what you believe, and why things get under your skin, why they're a pet peeve, or why you think this way about time or work ethic, or however that is. And then start looking at, okay, well, why am I rolling my eyes when this person walks by or I get this email from this person? And analyze. I love that you're talking about do the work. It starts with self. We say that a lot here. It starts with self, and then it will branch over and cascade into your relationships. It's so important. So, Lauren, can you give us some key takeaways? Our listeners, what can they apply from everything that you've shared with us that will help them apply this in their leadership?
Great question. I would start with you and understanding not only what leadership means to you, but what do you mean to leadership? So take stock of that and understand that relationship, whether you have
Mhm.
the title or not. And then
Excellent.
understand whether you are ready to elevate that. Now that you understand this bi-directional relationship, now what? Do you change? The choice is yours. And if you do choose, are you ready? Ask yourself the hard questions. Are you ready on a scale of 1 to 10 to make the choice to elevate
Mhm.
your leadership?
It's so good. Are you ready? We know, it almost feels like a church answer. Like we should say yes, but that may not be our real answer.
No, no.
Man. Well, let me ask you this. I love to ask an opposite question to get our listeners thinking an opposite way. If you had to give advice of saying, what is one poor decision you would warn our leaders to avoid? Like, don't do this one thing. You're better than that. What is the one thing our leaders should avoid doing?
Please don't skip out on humility.
Mhm. Ooh.
Please do not skip out on humility. You do not have all the answers. You never will. And that's okay. When you're being called out on something, stop, pause, and consider what you're being told. Take perspective and then use that feedback. It's so important. Time and time again, leaders are being given feedback and they actually they fight harder and debate their position, which takes extra energy. I don't understand it.
That's such great advice. And I just feel like that gets to the essence of whenever you strip away the arrogance and you become humble, it's like you're given a pair of glasses, a new lens to see way more clearly because the lens of pride and arrogance is so fogged. You can't see well. And I love it. Thank you for that. Where can our listeners go to learn more about you and get your book? And where can they learn more about your work?
Absolutely. I'm very active on LinkedIn, Loren Rosario-Maldonado. I also have my website, lorenrosario.com, and you can find my book, The Power of Cultural, Becoming the Change, The Power of Cultural Intelligence on Amazon and Kobo.
Awesome. Well, I will have links in the show notes for all of that. And I just thank you so much, Loren, for being here, for, hosting this important conversation to help us to just take a hot minute to suspend the judgment and say, whoa, who am I? What am I doing? Why am I behaving the way that I am? And doing that deep work because it's going to affect positively how we engage with other people and how we lead other people. So thank you so much for the work you're doing.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on your podcast, Bethany.
All right. Hey guys, until next time, continue putting in the work of building your life and leadership on the rocks, the essential rocks. God bless. Remember, the most essential rock you can build your life and leadership on is the rock of Jesus Christ. Today's Bible verse comes from Romans chapter 12, verses 3 and 4. For by the grace given to me, I say to everyone among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think with sober judgment, each according to the measure of faith that God has assigned. For as in one body, we have many members, and the members do not all have the same function. Hey, it's Bethany again. If you're enjoying the Leadership on the Rocks podcast, be sure to subscribe and follow so you don't miss a single episode. Also, be sure to rate the show. We hope to earn 5 stars in serving you in leadership, and through your ratings, it'll help us get the word out about what we do here at Leadership on the Rocks. If you feel this podcast is helpful, be sure to share it with your friends, family, and coworkers, or anyone who wants to grow in leadership, but also have harmony between their work and home life. Thanks, and I'll see you again in the next episode.